the CMT era was the same thing. CDs upon CDs upon CDs coming my way. And I would take them all in my CD book. You remember those? You open up and you have all the pages. And so I remember loading up that book. And sometimes I would drive to concerts for CMT and I'd listen to every CD that I had. And then some nights on Sundays, I would get on 840, which is like the far highway on the north. I guess it's the south of Nashville. And I just drive like the whole thing by myself and pull in the CD and kind of, if I knew, you can kind of know if you're going to like it or not pretty quick. Anybody, that's not just me. That's a lot of people know whether or not they're going to like something. So I just play one after another, 30 of them on a Sunday night and just drive around and listen to it, eat some Pringles and listen to CDs. So, this is a life.
There has got to be more than this.
Craig Shelburne, it's great to see you, man.
Great to see you too.
Thanks for coming back over the river.
I love it. I know it.
And it's just great to see you too, because we've known each other, albeit with gaps, but for almost 20 years.
Yeah, hard to believe that.
So wow. I've seen your star rise and shift to different parts of the sky through your time as music journalist for CMT. Yeah. And then Music Row.
Right. Yeah. Music Row.
And then you've penned a book before this one that we're going to talk about. Okay. Is that correct?
Yeah.
That was a question mark. I'm sorry.
Yeah. About Don Gibson. Is it
yes,
that one?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And now most recently, the brand new hard copy, hardbound coffee table edition of 100 Years of the Grand Ole Opry, which
there it is.
Looks like that. And it's beautifully embossed and also just chock full of pictures.
Lots of pictures.
And an authoritative history to boot. So I want to talk about the book, okay, and also draw on your capacities as now a local historian, at least with regards to country music. But it'd also be really interesting, I think, to talk about you and your capacities as a festival director. Okay, and then just having been here in Nashville at, if not the center, a center of the music scene for these 20 years, you've seen a lot of changes. So yeah. I think it's going to be a really interesting conversation.
Me too. Lots of things to talk about.
And a personal anecdote too. I am indebted to you. This is a thanks that's 20 years in the making for just making it so easy for me to move to Nashville from Seattle when I did. You gave me an early break at CMT when you were there. And then you even were kind enough to pick me up from the airport a few times and take me to some publishing meetings.
That's right.
Make me feel like I had a shot here in town.
Yeah, you were a good writer. I've been around a while at that point in Nashville, and I could hear something in your songs, and I felt like you should give Nashville a try, and you did.
And it's, 20 years later, it's like they haven't kicked me out yet.
There's time.
There's time. Yeah, there's plenty of time.
No, I think you're entrenched now. You're part of the community now.
Well, I'm honored. Let's talk about the Opry. How did this book come to be? First off,
I had this idea probably in 2017 or 18 to do a project about the 100th anniversary of the Grand Ole Opry. Being a journalist for so long in Nashville and really interested in classic country, I was always looking for anniversaries. It was the 50th anniversary of an album or 25th anniversary of a number one song by a country artist, which would give me a chance to go back and revisit that topic and maybe interview the person responsible for the song and just shed a new light on it after some history had gone by. So when I realized the 100th was coming up, I got way ahead of it because I wanted to be first. And so I had some agents that I knew, and they wanted to meet people in Nashville. They're from New York. And so I met them through my dear friend, Kathy Whitley, and we all went out. Peter Cooper was in the hang with us, and we were talking about things, and I introduced the agents to Dan Rogers, who at that time was working in marketing at the Grand Ole Opry, very involved with the marketing. He took the meeting, we sat around and talked about it, and then we said, let's do this again. And then I didn't really hear anything for years, and so I thought, that's cool, they'll do it internally. I was glad to give them a good idea. And then during that time, I took a job at the Americana Music Association as the festival producer, which is producing the showcases from 7 to midnight. And that was going well. And then I got the phone call saying, hey, we sold the book. When can you start? And I thought, just have a job now. But I said, okay, let's start. Let's start right away. So
those agents you were talking about were book agents.
Mm-hmm, they were, literary agents from New York.
And it was them who sold the book.
They did. They shopped it around New York in a very complicated process that I don't understand.
But your name was attached to it the whole time. Oh, okay.
No, the name was attached in the sense that I was among the list of writers that would be considered for it. That would be pitched, basically. Craig could do this, or there's other writers too, if you prefer. So it's up to the publisher to decide who's going to write the book. And so they bought the book they paid the Opry itself for the rights to the book. So it was up to the Opry at that point to decide who's going to write this book. And they wisely chose a woman that lives in East Nashville named Brenda Colladay, who was the historian for the Opry. And she worked at the museum back in the time when there was an Opry museum, and she knows more about the Opry than probably pretty much anybody. And she was like the perfect choice. And then the agents kind of lobbied for me, like, this was Craig's idea. Craig is good at this. Let's give him a chance too. So mysteriously, as I got this message, there's one other writer that's being considered in addition to you. And I was saying, I hope it's Brenda. I hope it's Brenda, because I want to write this with her. And I hope it's Brenda, but I can't ask. So I kind of rode that wave. And then between the two of us, Brenda was interested in taking part because she wanted the story to be right, because that's important to her. Being a historian at the Opry for so long, she has that knowledge on what is correct. And then I wanted kind of the heart and soul of the story to come through the pages too. So they kind of tentatively asked if we would do it together. I was like, yeah, buddy, you bet we'll do this together. Brenda's cool with it. So we met at the Frothy Monkey down the street in East Nashville, talked about how are we going to do this. And that was in April of 2023, and we turned it in October of 2024. So we hustled, but I couldn't have done it without her. And we made a great team. And she made the book better, 100 times better, by being part of it. And she knew where the archive, she knew what was in the archive and why certain things were very pivotal to the story. Because writing a book like this in a year and a half, that would have been really difficult if I didn't have Brenda as a resource. So
what's an example of something that she pointed out as being like, you've got to grab this story because this gets at what the Opry is all about? Yeah,
we had a couple of moments like that, but she knew the early stories from the Opry in 1925 up really until, the whole story, but she was especially knowledgeable in those first 50 years. And so we talked about Patsy Cline's involvement in the Opry, which took me like 4 or 5 times to rewrite it so that it was accurate, because Patsy was basically washed up when she came to the Opry. She was on a TV talent show, had a big hit after the show, had a bad record deal, got divorced, bottomed out. And the guitar player from the Opry said, you should just come play the Opry. Move to Nashville and do that. So she did, and then that's
from LA or
from Virginia, back in her hometown. So she came on board, and she was good enough to join. She just asked the general manager, "Hey, how do you get to be a member of the Opry?" And he's like, "You can be a member." Big moment backstage. So suddenly Patsy Cline's a member of the Opry. This is 1960. Brenda was also really...
This is before I Fall to Pieces and all of it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, she had Walking After Midnight from the Arthur Godfrey show, and then nothing for several years. And then she got connected with Owen Bradley and signed to Decca Records. And then she had that 2-year window of country stardom, and then cut short in 1963 when the plane went down, which was devastating because it also had several other Opry singers, Opry members on the plane with her. So imagine that, just you're doing a weekly show and 3 of your cast members are killed. So that was interesting too, because when we interviewed Marty Stewart, he remembered listening to that show as a kid. Wow. And hearing the people crying when they talked about the loss. So that was one of the best parts of working with Brenda, is that she was able to explain those things to me. For example, Minnie Pearl, very pivotal figure in the Grand Ole Opry. And she was also kind of at the end of her rope. She was living with her mom trying to figure it out, and she kind of had this character that she created when she was working in a traveling theater production, and she left that production, moved back with her mom, and then she was doing this kind of routine at conventions whenever they needed her, and also like working in a kind of a theatrical school for area children, basically teaching them about theater. And so somebody in the audience at one of the conventions said, "She's funny. I'm going to call this banker that I know so he can book her for that convention too." So she got that call and did that convention. And then someone at the second convention said, "I'm going to call the Opry folks and they might think she's funny to be on the Opry." So they called her, and she wasn't a country fan at all or didn't like hillbilly music or anything. She was very refined, or she would come to be very refined. But
was she really quick? She was a native Nashvilleian. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And she was
from
I always fancied her
outside
like a
of
Belle Meade type.
Native to Tennessee. She was raised like an hour outside of Nashville. But yeah, she ended up becoming very much part of the Nashville social scene as Sarah Cannon, her real name. Mm-hmm. But she...
Very beautiful young lady in the pictures.
Yeah.
That really comes out.
Yeah, she was country music's first female superstar, in my opinion. She came to the Opry in 1940, and they put her late in the show because they thought, well, if she bombs, everybody will be tuned out at that hour. Let's put her in there way at the end. But it worked. And people wrote all these letters saying how much they loved her, and they brought her into the cast shortly thereafter.
Wow.
Yeah.
When I was reading this book, the first question that came to my mind is, are there audio archives of old broadcasts?
Yeah.
Are they spotty? Is it
Yeah, that's
complete?
to my knowledge, it's not a comprehensive every show ever made, but there's quite a good bit of audio archive. And then when we got into later chapters, the video archive kicks in too. And so the audio archive for me was really helpful because there's this moment, I think in the 70s, when Porter Wagner invites James Brown to play the Opry because James was in town making a record, and in Porter's mind, someone of that stature is playing the Opry. That's good for the Opry because it's getting the word out that the Opry is doing this cool thing, and suddenly the Opry is a topic. So it's good publicity. But the only clips I could ever find of James Brown and the Opry were kind of chopped up and out of order, but the Opry archive had the entire performance, the entire 20-minute segment with James Brown on the Opry, which was super, super fun to listen to, and Porter's responses and everything too. So the Opry opened up their entire archive for the book. They were very, very generous. And before I ever signed the contract, we had a meeting with the executive saying, how do we want it to look? What do we want it to be like? And someone posed the question, do you want it to be the actual story, or do you want it to be more of like the great things that the Opry's done over the years? And someone in the room said, it needs to be everything. It needs to tell you the setbacks and the wins of the Opry over the 100 years. Because if you leave anything out, people are going to notice. And in my opinion, like, no one wants to read a book where everything goes right the entire time. It gets a little tedious if everything's great the entire time. So yeah, there's bad decisions and, things that the Opry could have done better, but gosh, there's a lot of things that the Opry did right and that they were way ahead of the curve on it. So once I finally figured out how to tell the story, which was making the Opry the central character rather than focusing on the cast members, when I finally figured that part out, the story unfolded a lot more naturally, in my opinion, for me. And it's just like anybody, there's things that I'm sure there are regrets, and there's things that are really high points and unforgettable moments. And I loved it because if you read it, my name's on the cover with the members of the Grand Ole Opry, who it's credited to. And that's really true because I spoke to about 50 or 60 Opry members to ask them what their experiences were. And then the ones that are no longer living, I was able to jump into the archive and read newspaper articles or watch video clips of them explaining what the Opry was to them. So,
is there an Opry librarian that's been in charge over the years? of compiling all of that stuff?
Yeah, there's
the
a team.
clippings and everything.
Yeah, there's a team. And back in the day, in the newspaper era, there was a clipping service. So whenever the Opry was mentioned in a newspaper anywhere around the country, a clipping service would clip it out of whatever newspaper it was and send it to the Opry. So sometimes you would, like in the 70s or 80s, there would be like 150 stories about the same thing because it just went over the wire service. And then every newspaper that ran the story from the wire service would be part of this service, and that clipping would go to the Opry. So you get a stack of the same thing sometimes, but that takes time to sift through. But they also had, international magazines in there. It's file cabinet after file cabinet after file cabinet of these newspaper clippings, but they're all very organized, and they were saved in the flood. And so thank goodness it's very comprehensive. And they've got an excellent, in my opinion, very excellent archive team.
Mm-hmm. So that was another question I had in going through the book was, were there materials lost in the 2010 flood or?
I don't know if there was anything lost. I forgot to ask, but I know that anything that I needed was still there. And one of the stage managers talked about, there's also a flood at the Opry House in 1975, and he talked about saving things by taking them to a higher ground. And then in 2010, same thing. They moved things from the museum and the archive higher, even those really heavy tapes, like back in the from the olden days. So there was a lot of scrambling in 2010 to save things, and certainly things were damaged without a doubt, but a lot of it was restored to the cost of millions and millions and millions of dollars. We finally did track down the amount of money spent to restore everything, and it was shocking to me. But it also showed the corporate involvement was interested in preserving. It would have been easy for a corporation to say, man, I hate to lose that, but let's focus on the future and make some more money. They thought instead, the Opry executives took that money and preserved what could have been lost. And so for that, I give them a lot of credit, because it would have been devastating to say, buddy, we lost it. But instead, they went in and saved it.
I don't know how familiar you are with Opryland. Did you ever go? You're not
from
here.
Yeah. I moved to Nashville in 94, so I went once or twice.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. And so my friend just made a documentary of Opryland. Did you get a chance to see it?
I haven't yet, but I don't know why I missed it, because everybody I know has seen it. I need to get over and see it.
It really is fantastic. And in contrast to what you just described with, the brass at the Opry being really concerned with preserving the history, that wasn't really the case with at least the new buyers with Opryland.
Not at that time, no.
And it was just like overnight, they kind of just gutted everything and sold it all off. And there wasn't even, part of the reason Brandon, who directed it, part of the reason why he made it, he grew up in Franklin, and they destroyed the Opryland so quickly that there wasn't even an announcement. People didn't even get to go one more time on the rides, and it was so important to so many childhoods around here. I had no idea any of this because I came in 04 or 5. But it was in contrast to what you're saying. There's almost zero desire to preserve any of that history of Opryland, which is a 30-year history.
Yeah. Opryland theme park was built around the Opry House. It was envisioned as one complete property, because at that time, downtown Nashville in the early 1970s looks nothing like downtown Nashville does right now. But Opry artists were going downtown every Saturday to play the shows, and it was pretty sketchy downtown Nashville, where the Ryman was, which is home of the Opry for that period of time. So the idea was to build a newer, bigger Opry House with a whole lot of parking, very comfortable. The Ryman didn't have air conditioning in the 70s, and it was very, very hot when you're smashed in there with, a couple other 1,000 people in August. So they moved it out to the suburbs, bought a piece of land, and one of the executives had been to Astro World in Houston and saw how they had built the theme park around the Astrodome and said, we should try that, and Disneyland, where there's Cinderella's castle and then all these theme park rides around it. So there's a focal point. So the decision was made, let's make the Opry House a focal point and build a theme park around it. It's a good idea because, kids would go in to see the Opry, or parents would take a break from the roller coasters and go watch the Opry. So yeah, it worked really well. And then they were this is in the book and it shocked me, which there were plans to tear down the Ryman and use the bricks to reconstruct it as the little chapel at Opryland. Come on now, you're going to tear down the Ryman for the little chapel at Opryland? And there's a rendering and a heartfelt, this guy's trying to really convince people with a letter to the editor, I guess, that this was a good idea. And the architecture for the New York Times chimed in on this and published a piece saying, this is not what preservation is. I wish I had written down her quote because it's very poetic on how she said it. Ada Louise Huxtable. And I think the way I understand it, the executives were kind of ashamed to be called out that way by a national publication and a highly prominent architecture critic. So they scrapped the plans for the little chapel at Opryland. Thank goodness the Ryman still stands. That would have been, I just can't even imagine. That would have been a huge mistake.
It's crazy to see like those early pictures of the Ryman in the book, and like the front facade on, I think it's 4th Street, how utterly unchanged it is.
Yeah.
It could be 2025 minus the cars and everything. And there's something that's really, what is the feeling I wanted to point out? It's associated with peace and comfort. And there's this timelessness that when you approach things like anything with a long tradition that makes you feel a sense of your the smallness of your individual being, in the large scope of time. And this was one of the things about country music that's so, and this is, forgive me in advance for saying this because I really am on the outside of it all. I grew up in Idaho and, John Denver was as close as we got to country music in my family. But we had tradition, and I was of our own, and so I was exposed to that. And unlike so many genres, the history of country music is really uniquely long, I guess I would say. So it's to its credit, the folks that are sort of the guardians, that they make an attempt to keep it alive.
Yeah.
And that's part of what, the impetus for this book was, I think.
Yeah, it was to tell the story, to make sure that people understand why it's so much loved. I mean, I love it. I grew up watching it. So this wasn't just like another assignment for me. I put a lot of my own heart into this. But so many of the Opry members love it as much as I do. And so I think that was the unintended effect of writing this book, was there were so many people that really care about it. I mean, it means so much to so many people. And I think that really shines through. And there's a lot of facts on here, a lot of history, but there's a lot of emotion too. So as you read it, it isn't just this happened and then this happened and then this happened after that. Like, there's a lot of people who were there explaining why it matters. So there's a lot of context.
Craig, I wonder this, was it hard to, like you said earlier, there were so many people that care about the history so much. So there's going to be a lot of eyeballs on your work as it was going on. And did that make you feel, if not nervous, accountable might be a word to use, but also was that hard for you to kind of take direction if there was direction offered, or just, play well with others?
No, it wasn't hard for me because I've been a freelance journalist for a long time and a journalist in general. So I'm used to writing for a client, which is basically what this was. So I would take the draft with Brenda and I would work on the draft together. And then,
how would that work? I just wonder that too. Would you type a draft and send it to her and she edit it and send it back?
Yeah. She was really interested in like the accuracy and the flow. I like to write, and so I like kind of figuring out a good way to tell the story that makes it accessible to a reader. So between the two of us, we were a great team because we each have that strength that together we're powerful. So I would come to East Nashville about every 2 weeks and we'd go through it and like, is this the right kind of word, or is this exactly right? Or she would say, not exactly. And so we would fine tune it. And we did that probably together 2 or 3 times. And she was responsible for marking up the PDF to send it back to the copy editors. God bless her, because that's tedious, but she did it. But I read it 5 or 6 times, and then like on the 5th pass, they're like, okay, it's done. I was like, no. Give me one more. And I like begged, I like laid on the railroad track, please let me read it one more time. And so they gave in and let me read it one more time.
And when you say read it, was it like, did you read it in the context of it being laid out like it is now?
Yeah.
So
it was just the pages from the book. And so there were things that even I was getting tripped up when I didn't quote. I thought I understood it, but the way I had it written, I thought, is the reader going to get this? Probably not. So go back to the drawing board and kind of fine tune it. And, that would happen 5 or 6 pages out of all of the pages, but I didn't want anybody to get kind of stumble out of the story and figure out like, what does this mean? So yeah, thank goodness they let me smooth it out. And then after I sent those last pages off, I've never read it again. Yeah, it's weird because I do these interviews and I think I should probably pick that back up, but I'm really happy with it. So I think when I do read it again, I'll be very satisfied with it.
Well, and we're in very much the front side of its life.
Yeah.
In the world, right? And, it came out in
April.
April
2025. Yep. And I was on the Opry that night. They put me on the Grand Ole Opry.
Did your family come out?
Oh yeah, everybody came out to that, which was fun. They brought me, and I was super nervous because I knew what the questions were going to be, and I practiced them, and I practiced my answers, and I made it through. And then I go out to the lobby during intermission and sign copies, and that was fun. It's fun, you know how it is. Somebody is excited to get their hands on something you created and want you to sign it. It's gratifying.
There's also, what's nice about it too, is there's no performance element to that part of it. You've done all of the work. Yeah. So you can just accept your laurels.
Yeah. Yeah. The only performance element I had was the night I was on the Opry, the first time they let me wear Marty Robbins' watch from the 50th anniversary. So every member of the Opry in 1975 got a gold watch. And the Opry archive has Marty Robbins' watch now. And so Marty Robbins' birthday was also 1925. So he would have been 100 years old this year, or in 2025. So I got to stand up at the podium and like show the watch, and they showed it on the Jumbotron at the Opry. And, people wanted to get in line to come and see Marty Robbins' watch too, which I'm happy to show, where I would go like this when I would sign so people could take the picture of the watch. So there's a little bit of performance, but it's the Opry. You got to be a little flashy,
a little flash,
entertaining, and make them feel like they're getting the best show they've ever seen. So, I've probably signed out there 10 times after that. I love it. There's no place I'd rather go. Any free night, I would love to go to the Opry pretty much any night if I could.
Maybe this is a nice segue into you as a writer and the Craig Shelburne behind the book. But what you hinted at it earlier, growing up in Nebraska and listening to the Opry as a kid, and maybe you can talk a little bit about how did this happen? Who turned you on?
Yeah, it's an interesting story to me, at least. So, like, I grew up in a really rural area of Nebraska, down in the southeast corner, like down by Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska, where they all meet. And my dad was a history teacher. My mom liked country music. My dad didn't really like it. And so, like, we would, after dinner, we would wash the dishes, and my mom had a small black and white TV in the kitchen where we could watch TNN while we were cleaning up the kitchen. And then there would always be these commercials at the end of the show saying, visit Nashville and take a ride on the General Jackson, or things like that. And I think I'm going to do that someday. Like, as a kid, I just thought that sounds like my kind of vacation. So I filed it away. And then as I got older, my older brother was super into sports, and so like really good at it. And of course I was terrible. I can't throw anything or catch anything. I became a runner later in life, but like at that time couldn't do it. So he would go to track meets or whatever, and I'd get dropped off at my mom's parents' house. And thank goodness they liked country music, and they liked TNN, which was the Nashville network, really big deal at cable TV at the time. So we watched that channel every night. And then I got really interested in the history of country music by watching the Opry, because every Saturday night there would be a different lineup on the Opry show. So you would tune in not knowing who was going to be on. And sometimes it was like Randy Travis, and sometimes it was Wilma Lee Cooper, people that I didn't necessarily know. And so because of watching the Opry with my grandparents, I got this education that kind of put me ahead of the curve a little bit when I got to Nashville in 94, because I just got obsessed with country music. In like 1990, I was just, it was everything to me. And I kind of learned like that's going to be my path. And all through high school, it was just, I loved it. And I went to college in Nebraska for a year, and I thought, so I took these journalism classes, and I found that I had an aptitude for it. But I thought, if I stay here, it's going to be like football, writing about football, or writing about church, or writing about like family stuff. I was like, this isn't really anything interesting to me. If I'm going to be a journalist, I want to write about music. And because my grandma had all these magazine subscriptions, I knew there was a whole bunch of magazines in Nashville. And I thought, I'll just go do that. Sounds pretty easy. So yeah, packed up my car and moved to Nashville.
Did you
go 1994
school at Belmont?
I did. I went to Belmont back when it was pretty small. So
you got a journalism degree?
I did. It was the only school in Nashville with a journalism degree. So
did you ever try to play music?
No.
Or you weren't drawn to it in that way?
No.
Not even curious, or like, I don't want to.
The closest I got was I took like a guitar course at Belmont for an elective, because you had to have so many electives, and like did not succeed. I mean, I was real happy when I learned how to strum. I was like, I've made it, but I couldn't tune it right, and I couldn't read the music fast enough. And I basically didn't even get past going dun 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 dun. And it's like I think that was a pass-fail elective, luckily, and he passed me, but I was not at all. No, and I never really wrote lyrics or wrote poetry or to make it into songs, and didn't really, I sang when I was in a small town, but everybody did, because you have to, or there's no choir if you everybody has to jump in there. But I gave up singing pretty fast when I got to Nashville. Yeah, willingly, nobody needed that. Like Nashville didn't need another singer. So yeah.
While you're just talking about this, I'm thinking back I have so much admiration for you and just love from having known you.
Thank you.
Just because partly, you're high integrity, and you're wicked smart. You're the guy that's often like the funniest guy in the room if you're lucky enough to be within earshot to hear a comment. And
to listen. Yeah,
but
exactly.
Also, I think that there's something about how you feel about music that even though I'm on the artist side of it, or I have been for many years and made records and sang, and I'll get on stage and do it in front of people if you let me. At the same time, I've always felt like a little uncomfortable with everything kind of outside of the stage part of it. Like, I feel like just bear with me here, because I don't exactly know what I'm trying to say. But it has to do with the show not being over once you're off the stage, with the artist calling in a sense. And for me, I always wanted to be anonymous as soon as it was done, and not out of any sort of not even shyness or false modesty or something like that. It was more just like the freedom of being kind of the freedom to be truthful in my expressions. And I feel like the political side of the music business, I could hardly stand to do it at all. And the trade-off is that if I loved something, I just loved it so much. And I would just I would be the first person to tell you how wonderful I think you are. But if I didn't like it very much, or I didn't get it, which is probably a better way to put it, because there's lots of things I just don't get. Who knows why? I'm not sophisticated enough. I don't know. But I couldn't fake it, even if it meant maybe I could get an opening slot. I just couldn't do it. And I remember reading not too long ago about Mumford and Sons, a huge band, right? And they resurrected this, but I think it was the first time I had this sort of realization. They went on a train tour. It had a name. I can't remember. You know what I'm talking about? And it was like a who's who of celebrities. Everybody wanted to be on that train with the Mumford & Sons. Like Taylor Swift was on and everything. And I thought, God, that just sounds like a fucking nightmare if like I was an artist and I was on that train. And I thought again, I'm like, but you know what I would really love is I was on that train to cover it, to just like watch what happened and to write about it. That sounded really interesting to me.
Yeah.
And that's maybe that's why I'm for this diversion for a second, because like there's that is connected to something about what you're describing and your attraction to being part of this the scene and wanting to cover it.
Yeah. Observing is fun. It's way more fun for me.
It's pretty fun.
Yeah. And there's a couple of things that I've learned along the way. And one of them is to, like, if you're covering something, get out in the audience. Don't stay backstage, because you're not going to be able to see how the audience is responding to things. And you might miss like the moment of the show that's going to be the high point of the show. But if you're backstage kind of looking from around the corner, you're not going to know. So I always sit in the back of any venue, basically. If you want to know if I'm at a show, just look against the back wall, very close to the secret exit, and that's probably where I will be. But I learned that at CMT because I would take part of my job there, CMT.com, was to write concert reviews. And so I went to shows all over the US for opening weekends or whatever. And often I would get these really great seats, and I would just take those tickets and give them to a fan and go sit in their seat way up at the top. So that way you can see the whole production and see the lights and watch the crowd respond. And I just had a lot more fun doing that. But, you know, CMT is a big corporation too. And so you have to be pretty delicate on how you review things that you don't like, because like you said, it's hard to fake it. And so really in those instances, I would just write like, you know, what the crowd thought, or it was like a crowd pleasing set. You know, I hated it, but like the crowd was really into it. So there's a delicate way to take yourself out of that story while you're still reviewing. Reviewing, I hope, my opinion, I think it's kind of over, people reviewing things. Yeah. Everyone's got an opinion now. You don't need a journalist in there telling you how it went, what they thought. And then, yeah, the other thing, my little secret trick at CMT was, well, so people would make the video and they would come to the conference room and we'd all sit around and watch it, or they would come and sing for us, which is treacherous sometimes. So we'd all sit and watch and smile, and sometimes it just isn't very good. I mean, that's just any genre of music. But they were so excited to be there, and, you know, a lot of people in the room would say, that was amazing. I never knew what to say, and then I finally came up, and I would like try to get out of the side door of that conference room as fast as I could too. But sometimes I couldn't, and they would say, Craig, what did you think? And I would always say, man, I'm really glad I got a chance to hear that.
Yeah.
And I think that's a compliment, and it is, you know, like, yeah, you know, you introduced me to something. Thank you for giving me the chance to hear you.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to get back to work. See you later, you know, and slide on out of there.
Relatedly, when you see from doing film stuff and seeing somebody's short film or something that they're really proud of, and it's just, maybe it's quite terrible, but you can't say that. And they work so hard on it. And so a very easy thing to say is like, you did that.
Yeah.
Like you saw it through, and I'm so proud of you for seeing it through.
Yeah.
Like, it's a compliment. It's really hard to finish something.
Yeah. Like, I'm really glad you showed that to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice.
You know, it's true. Like I felt like that way. I'm not lying, because I really was happy to be introduced to something. As a journalist, you get the opportunity to hear a lot of things and see a lot of things and listen to a lot of things. So that's how you kind of fine tune your taste a little bit. But yeah, I was never the person that said, that was amazing. You know, because I would because if you do that, then I don't know. I'm just not really good at pretending that I love it. Don't.
You have to live with yourself at the end of the day. And if you lie too much, for any reason, it gets harder to sleep.
And I guess to that, I would say maybe I didn't like it, but I would still often write about it. You know, that's not up to my job wasn't to curate at CMT. It was just to report on what was going on. So that was a good job for me, because I would have to interview people that I really wasn't interested in at all. But you know, the audience wants to hear about this artist or this person. So you have to figure out, how do you write for an audience? You know, it's something that I think is missing a little bit now. Is in coverage, you just kind of write about what you like, or a lot of media coverage is just what's popular and well known right now. So what I always try to do is cover as much of what was out there as I could, regardless of how I felt about it. You know, came up in the 90s where journalists didn't really put themselves into the story. It was never about me. I rarely, if ever, put my own experience into a story. It was almost always through an artist's voice and an artist's journey. So, yeah, that was a fun time.
You were talking about, before we were micing, how much the business has changed since you got involved. Like you said, you moved to Nashville in early mid-90s.
Yeah.
And you went through the 90s boom, the crash out.
Yeah.
What was that, Napster? And then kind of the aughts.
Yeah.
Which is when I was in my 20s. Hard time for the Gen Xers there in the aughts.
Yeah.
As the industry was trying to cobble together a new mechanism. And then now in the teens and thereafter, but also with the loss of print media.
Yeah.
So you weathered all of that.
Somehow.
And what is, I mean, what's changed, Greg?
Oh, you know. Well, I think in the 90s there were so many magazines because that was how you would learn music. If you were, like where I grew up in Nebraska, we didn't have any progressive radio stations or college stations. Like there was nothing but TNN and like country radio for me. But when I would read those magazines, it just exposed you to a lot of other kinds of artists and albums that were out there. So that's what attracted it to me, because I could go look for those records next time we were in a record store 100 miles from where I grew up. But I liked being able to read. I was always a reader, and so that was also interesting to me, is how is this person writing the story. So yeah, the print media was pretty prevalent in the 90s in Nashville, and there was 3 or 4 country music magazines, and I got to write for a lot of those as an intern. One called Music City News that really taught me a lot. And as the web kind of took off around the year 2000, late 90s, early 2000s, there was a lot of content being, so to speak, given away. You know, you didn't have to have a subscription to read it, because you would get assigned a story and it would go up on the website, and hopefully that website had a merchandise component and people would buy the album. That was the model. But as soon as content started being given away, you know, magazine subscriptions dropped pretty significantly, and there goes your revenue. If your subscription base goes down, advertisers are less likely to buy an advertisement because it's not reaching as many people as it used to. So then the advertising revenue went away. And that's kind of, in my opinion, that's the loss of the money is really what happened to the print magazines and country music. It wasn't for lack of interest. It was just like, you can get a lot of that same material for free.
Yep.
And so why pay?
And how long did it take for it really to implode?
Oh gosh. So I moved back, moved to Nashville in 94. After college graduation, I moved to Austin for like a year and a half just to try it, and didn't take. Different story, different time. But I'm glad I went, because I learned how to love live music, which was something, you know, in college I wasn't 21 really for most of that. Not a drinker either at that time. So moving to Austin, and I'm 22 years old, and I can go out and go to all the shows, and it was great. Didn't work as a career, but it was a lot of fun. So anyway, I moved back New Year's Day of 2000, and started getting a lot of emails about writing for websites, which were kind of new at the time. Websites were kind of a new thing for content. So I said yes to all that, because I was trying to get my writing career back. And that's kind of when it started fizzling out a little bit, because there was just more and more and more of those kind of websites. Like I wrote for one called Music Now, I think, or CD Now or something like that. Music Country was one of them.
And would you be paid by the piece in that case? And that's what I feel like it instantly changed to that.
Yeah. There was, you know, like $50 for a record review, or, you know, and then, you know, some of those magazines were hanging on, you know, like Music City News called me to go interview Waylon Jennings in the year 2000, just like backstage at the Ryman. He was making a live album at the Ryman, and I was asked to come back and interview Waylon, which is great because it's this beautifully laid out piece in a magazine. If it was internet, it'd be gone. Like you'd never be able to find that again. So, so there was a moment when those overlapped, and Country Weekly held on for a while, but that finally went away. And then I will say though, like I got lucky with CMT.com because that was the job that changed my life for sure. In 2002, I got hired there because they were at that time, early 2000s in CMT, they would play a lot of different stuff. They would play a lot of Alison Krauss. They would play the kind of music that would become known as Americana. They were pretty far ahead of the curve on progressive music. So yeah, I wanted to be over there so bad. I wanted it so bad to be working at CMT, but gosh, it's just one of those jobs that you see from the outside. Like, how am I ever going to get in there? Mm-hmm. So one of the guys that was a writer took a job at the Hall of Fame. And so that job opened up, and I guess I can't remember how I heard about it. I doubt if it was posted anywhere, probably just word of mouth. And I applied for it and had enough clippings, and I was young enough and willing to work for pretty, modest means, but it was like a dream gig. And, even CMT wasn't sure if the internet was going to be a thing yet. So we were all set up in a trailer outside of the corporate headquarters. We would just park in front of the trailer and go in and sit in a long line of desks inside the trailer and create CMT.com content every day. And felt very detached from everything else. And then later that year, we all moved downtown under one roof. And then I think by then it became pretty obvious, like you got to keep the .com component in every single thing that you do in the network and even beyond that. So that's when it really started to feel like it was taking off for me, because they would bring artists in to talk to the Countdown show, which was great. And then they had like CMT radio had a lot of outlets. Like there was a syndicated show, so the artists would talk to them. And then at the very end of the media day, they would come and talk to me. But everything had run late. So there's like, Craig, you got 7 minutes to talk to Toby Keith. I'm like, all right, let's do it. You sit down and say hello and you just like jump right in, which is kind of when I learned to be prepared and learn how to kind of keep that mental clock ticking in my mind, knowing I have to get enough material here to make it interesting. And I also have to ask him things that he hasn't already answered, because I could go back and take answers from radio or TV, but my questions were usually a little deeper than just the new single or whatever. So that was kind of when I started hitting my stride. I think in Nashville was when I was the guy at the end of the day. You come and see me before you get back to your truck, and make them laugh and ask them musician related questions, and then they remember you. If you ask them kind of celebrity questions or what's your favorite part of Mother's Day, that's never gonna stick with an artist. But if you ask them about a certain lyric or a certain influence that they had that maybe no one else has ever asked them about, you kind of get that reputation of being somebody that's important to talk to while you're at CMT. So I rarely got more than 7 minutes, but like I used them and almost never got cut out completely, which I was grateful for.
So you mentioned thinking about the Tennessean as being another one of those elite institutions that never could I ever.
Yeah.
And then did Peter, you've written for the Tennessean?
Yeah, I did a few freelance stuff in the late 90s there, and I think even in the early 2000s I did. Yeah, back when they had a lot of freelancers, and I would go into the building and try to figure out how to use those computers. It was just weird. Newspaper computers are not like regular computers, because they would have to, what you would write would be like transferred into the printing, I guess. It was like a whole new language for me. But this
different hardware, the actual computer.
It was really difficult for me to grasp, because I'm not a techie. But they stashed me in the corner with Brad Schmidt and Peter Cooper and Tom Rowland. And, I was like 23 or something. Like, this is great. I think I was probably a little older than that. I can't remember. But that's probably 25. But those guys were the greatest, I thought. Like, they had a good banter between them, and it is interesting to go into a newsroom, which I guess you just can't do anymore. But it's just like a whole floor of people just clattering away, and everyone's trying to keep up on the news. And I was always fascinated by it because of the deadlines. Like, there's a certain time you have to stop writing it because it's going to go out to the press and into people's front doors the next day. So it's not like internet where something happens and you can write it and publish it, and there you go. 5 minutes later, you've got the story. Yeah, that one you would have to kind of race the clock, make sure you had the photos that you needed, and then send it off. So there wasn't a lot of chit chat, but you get to be pretty good at not cynicism, but sarcasm, I guess, would be a good kind of the gallows humor when you're working at a newsroom. Everyone's got it, and I was like, this is the place for me. And I was pretty quiet. I think that was a lesson that I learned early on, was just kind of observe. Don't always be chiming in with your own opinion if you've only been in the newsroom for like 6 weeks. Like, no one cares what you think. Like, watch other people and how they interact with one another. So yeah, Peter was a good guy, and Tom is too, and Brad is too. So I was very fortunate in my early fledgling years to kind of be able to see it firsthand, from magazine to newsroom to internet. Like, I was able to kind of be part of that whole trajectory.
And so, having spent so much time getting to know almost everybody in a way that came out of any consequence in country and in related subgenres, that may have served you when you were tapped to become the program director at the AmericanaFest.
Yeah, it really did. Because in the 90s, like, I graduated from Belmont in 97 and got a job at a magazine called New Country. And this was at a time when CDs were everywhere. And so everybody would be sending CDs to the office. And I was 20, right out of college, 23 years old, not a lot of money, but like CDs everywhere. And people that worked there were older than me and weren't impressed. They're just like, clutter to them. But I thought, there's so much music on these shelves that I haven't heard yet, and artists that I don't know, and I couldn't wait.
Yeah.
So this was, late 90s, and I loved it. I listened to everything and really retained it. It's my secret weapon, I guess, is I can kind of retain who people are and what they did and why they matter and how they fit into the whole landscape. And so from then on, I knew a lot about that era of music, which was really before the Americana Music Association was even around. The term was there, because the term Americana started with the radio chart in 1995, but the association was, 4 or 5 years later. So, yeah, and then the CMT era was the same thing. CDs upon CDs upon CDs coming my way. And I would take them all in my CD book. You remember those? Yeah. You open up and you have all the pages. And so I remember loading up that book. And sometimes I would drive to concerts for CMT, and I'd listen to every CD that I had. And then some nights on Sundays, I would get on 840, which is like the far highway on the north. I guess it's the south of Nashville. And I just drive like the whole thing by myself and pull in the CD and kind of, you can kind of know if you're going to like it or not pretty quick. Anybody, that's not just me. That's a lot of people know whether or not they're going to like something. So I just play one after another, 30 of them on a Sunday night, and just drive around and listen to it, eat some Pringles and listen to CDs. So I'm like, what? This is a life.
I mean, this is amazing nerdery.
Yeah.
That has brought you to this moment. It's all been prep.
Yeah. And so because I had such access and knowledge because of my interest in listening. Yeah, when I got that job to be the producer of the festival, I had a pretty substantial knowledge of the community and who's in it and who our audience, who the AmericanaFest audience would be interested in seeing. And so, and how they fit in and what they sound like and who they would be good next to on a lineup. So, and
you've known everybody at the Americana Music Association for 20 years, the whole time you've been in Nashville, just about.
Yeah.
And so it would probably be a natural fit to have you step in that role.
Yeah, it felt pretty natural.
And then and also just having, listened to you for these minutes,
rambling
getting a
on.
sense of like how diplomatic you are.
Oh yeah.
That's another angle that has served you well, I'm sure, in your current position there. And I'm just wonder, is the thing that is different, it's not writing. It's very organized. You're slotting in acts, and probably are you having to deal like, and also anything I ask, and if we'll just strike this, no one will ever know if it's too like behind the velvet curtain. I'm sure like managers are like vying for their artists to be on this night and that night. And do you have to deal with all of that? And are people mad at you ever? And
sure.
You don't mind making people mad?
No, I mean, it doesn't. Part of the work of that job is to figure out who belongs where and can they fill the room, because AmericanaFest, we have, for those people who've never been, it's a 5 nights in Nashville. Usually it's a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And Tuesday is primarily parties, but if an artist can only play on Tuesday and you're Charles Wesley Godwin, then I would love. And Daryl Scott this year played it on Tuesday because that was the night he could do it. And I would do anything to get Daryl Scott on the lineup. So
same.
Yeah,
he's
God.
like the poster child of this podcast.
Oh my gosh, he's like, that was a great first night. That was super fun. So
this last year in
2025 lineup, it was Daryl Scott followed by Charles Wesley Godwin, and I got Charles because I knew he covered "You'll Never Leave Heart and Alive" during COVID just by himself, and I wasn't going to put anybody after Daryl. Like, how would you even follow that? But I saw that he was going to be in town doing a pop-up concert for his record label, and I was like, would you like to just add on to this? If you don't, that's okay. Because there was really no pressure. Like, we'll end the night with Daryl if you don't want to. But if you do want to, I think it would be a great late night solo set. And so he said he would do it. So that's the kind of thing a lot of it is timing and grace, asking kindly and trying to explain why it would be special. Like, anybody in Nashville would love to have that slot after Daryl Scott, but that one worked because that was like a mutual understanding of each other's styles. So
one thing that I've learned on the artist side when I've put myself forward for opportunities, at first I thought that, as many young people do, that I was so wonderful, why wouldn't you want me? And then in time you kind of step back and you see what's going on, and that everything is really about it being a good fit. It's you're providing a service, they're providing a service. Ultimately, it's the audience who needs to be served. Otherwise, the thing that you're trying to build together dies. And that's been really helpful for me to kind of know to negotiate some of those things better. And it's whenever someone is foolish enough to ask any advice from me, that's one thing I try to impart with the younger people. It's just like, when you're trying to make a play for yourself, think in advance about, like what you have to offer. If you have 50 people to offer, then that's great. If you're playing a venue that needs 50 people, but don't, be surprised if you're rejected for that opening slot for 1,000 people, unless it's sold out and you have huge pull with somebody.
Right. And even then,
well, that's really interesting, and this is another thing that I'm just like curious. Since you answered that question, perhaps you'll answer this one.
Maybe.
The Americana, I've been involved and not involved, but I've been, obviously like a part of this community for the whole time I've been here, and so I watched it grow and even had conversations with some of the folks about their efforts to increase its audience. And I just wonder what, in your capacity as program director, what are the issues that are facing Americana in terms of like how they're trying to grow? What do you guys perceive to be the limiting factors, and what strategies are you employing to overcome those?
Yeah, I can speak to the showcases side of that. Probably better than the rest. But for me, I kind of look at the whole community. I think the association really, from my viewpoint, I'm trying to engage everybody. So it's less about like choosing a specific artist to help that artist's career as it is about like, how do I represent everything that's going on right now? So the way it works for me is we open up a submission portal, and then anyone who's a member can submit for a showcase. It can be the agent or the manager, the label, or the artist themselves. So
is that portal open yet?
It opens in late January. So this year it's opening on the 21st, probably.
So by the time of this airing, it will be open.
Yeah. And it's open for 5 weeks. And then, and every year I've done it, we've gotten more than 1,500 submissions for people that want to play, and there's about 200 slots now. So it's an uphill battle right off the bat. But the part about the venues, they're part of the community too. So when I talk about the greater community, you have to include the venues, because there's no way AmericanaFest would happen without venue cooperation. So it's also up to me. This was a very important lesson for me early on, is that you have to make sure those venues are thriving that week too. Because you can put bands in there that you like, but if they're 40% full, the venues aren't going to be happy with you, and they'll be less likely to be your cheerleader if you kind of keep giving them half empty rooms. So a lot of times it takes conversations with venues and managers and agents, and even internally among staff, like what works well. And so many artists can't be here for 5 days. It's great when you can, but it's hard for a touring musician to stay in one city for 5 days. So sometimes you're only available on Friday. Sometimes you're only available on Tuesday. And so that's my first step, is figuring out who has limited availability that I want, and then pop them on the grid first. So usually there's like 4 or 5 waves of announcements. And the first wave is like who, you have to have some names on the top of the poster too, but who do you want that's only around on Thursday? And you make sure there's a spot for them. So yeah, that's really how I approach it. And I really try to make sure that the lineups flow pretty well, so that if the way Nashville is now, it's harder than it used to be to get from one venue to another. So we have found a lot of people will just go to Station Inn for the night, which you can blame them, because I love it too, and go to Third and Lindsley for the night, because that's kind of the bigger names, because it's the largest room we have other than Brooklyn Bowl. So once those lineups are kind of taking shape, it's like what you said, does it fit? There might be 5 or 6 artists that are available that I like, that would, be a great addition to the lineup, but which one fits this night the best? So it's not too much of a curveball or odd or whatever. And then, I run it. We do have a showcase committee where we have other people that take a look at the submissions and help me out in terms of placement and just advice, because this isn't just me picking it. And then we put the lineups together. So I guess in terms of diversifying and stuff, I always say just like I want more of everything, but I have 200 slots. So there is a limitation there, but to the best of my ability, I do try to represent everything that's making waves in the community and make sure there's an opportunity to get there. And then I don't think this is giving away too much, but like I chopped off a few 11 p.m. slots in 2025, because I think, it's great to get a showcase, but if you're playing 11 o'clock on a Friday and 40 people come, was it worth it to fly across the country or to spend the day in Nashville to play for 40 people? I don't think so. Maybe, but if the band is good, like I never took that slot away from anybody. I just stopped programming it. So now pretty much, I would venture to say pretty much everyone that's accepted has a good slot. There's no secondary slot or a slot that's like, well, not so great. Everything that I would offer has value. And sometimes there are shows on Wednesday during the awards show. Showcase is taking place at Third and Lindsley or a couple other venues. And that's because the artist is only available on Wednesday and they want to play. So there's sometimes this theory like they're competing against the award show. But I'm very explicit in saying like there is an award show on Wednesday, but also have this stage if you do want to play at the same time as the awards. And most of the time artists do. They just want a chance.
Sure.
So if that's what I can offer, they can take it. And sometimes they don't, and that's okay too. That's the thing that I think gets overlooked sometimes as an artist. Every artist that's on that lineup said they accepted the offer. Nobody was forced to play a showcase. There's a lot of conversations that go into figuring out where and when and how you're going to play. And it looks pretty easy.
I'm just curious, do you guys have these conversations on Zoom internally, and then are these just like long email threads, or all of them?
Mostly emails, or and I'll print out everybody that submitted too. Mm-hmm. So I'll have a list of like 1,500 names and pass it around the office too, and have, like, put your initials by somebody that you like.
You're pulling for it.
And so then after it goes around everybody in the office, I kind of figure out, did I miss somebody that like 4 of my coworkers really love? And then that helps me go back and listen to it. And then, I show it to the venue. Like, I'll take meetings with the venue sometimes. Some venues station in a 5-spotter, like, whatever you book, we're happy. And then there's other venues that are like, let's talk about it, And that's part of it, like I said, they're part of the community, and I want them to feel invested in it. So,
I mean, I love this conversation. This is a surprise spur, and
full of surprises.
Well, I just, I think about this. I'm a dad now. I'm not touring I'm in a season where I'm not going to tour, and maybe who knows what's happening. I got this show that we're trying to sell.
Yeah.
But I've always been drawn to the writer's life, and I probably know more about books than music. I don't know if I want to make that public, but I am really invested in the community here. I love it here, and I think it's really special, especially the human side of it, vis-a-vis AI and all of the dehumanizing elements that are present in our world today. Here we are, these human beings that were making art, and also the geographical nature of Nashville. It's so small, it's easy to get around. There's just like a fantastic community here, and a big part of what I'm trying to do with the podcast is celebrate that community and some of the shinier talents in it. And so I probably will reach out to y'all and try to figure out how I can. This is what I'm trying to say, is like I want to see how I can help. It's really, in my own small or medium or large way. And I think that that won't change.
Yeah, that's a great way to approach it, is how do I help the community? How can I come to you and find a way to benefit a large group of people? Well,
and by community, I mean like this community, the Americana community, and then just like the music itself. They say it all begins with a song, and it's really true. And yet, I also want to cultivate an appetite for the kind of music, kind of carefully crafted, lyrically oriented, musically driven music that I love so much. And I came to it late in the game because I didn't have a very particularly musical family, but I had some aptitude, and I had to take piano lessons as a kid, and it was piano lessons and then a high school rock band that I was around. But anyway, I noticed that a corollary to what I'm doing is just like getting kids, whenever possible, like excited and interested and at least exposed to people playing music in a room. It's like, here you take it for granted because you just grow up and everybody plays.
Right.
But like where you grew up and where I grew up, I never saw a band until I was 19 years old, and I think had I seen somebody do it in front of me, I would have been like, oh, this is something you can do. Yeah. Wow. And like, wow, he's doing something with his hands. He can actually play guitar. Like that's so exciting when you're young. And like having a kid right now, we have a 1-year-old. It's crazy to see how she responds to music. Maybe every parent thinks their child is a prodigy, but we have a piano lesson once a week already. We kind of were getting familiar with it, and she plays it, and it's just like having her like hands on an instrument. It's just like that kind of stuff. I feel like instills that sort of curiosity that's basic to the experience of somebody either playing, performing, writing, or consuming music.
Yeah.
So I want everybody to love Americana music.
Me too.
Okay, we've really gone over a little bit.
That's all right.
It's so fun to talk to you. What's next? What's I think I know the answer to this.
Yeah.
I'll let you tell me.
Yeah. So I have a book coming out in May. On May 19th, I was hired to write the memoir of Clint Black's life with Clint. So we spent a year and a half together, and told his life, put his life story down on the page. So Clint was a very important person to me. as a young man loving country music. And so he came along in 1989, right when there was a boom of a bunch of different artists that were making traditional sounding country music. And he was really one of the best, and he was winning all the awards. And then he had like a really significant career. But, you know, as time goes by, I think, you know, people kind of forget those achievements of the 90s. And I was here when it happened. So I thought I'd love to be able to be considered for that. So I threw my hat in the ring, or I was asked, you know, would you be open to doing this? And so, yeah, Clint and I had a phone call, and that went real well. And so we signed on, and yeah, we got it down, and Clint is really happy with it too. And that makes a difference too, because that's like your chance to tell your life.
Yeah.
And so, and you know, there's a lot of things that came in and came out of the manuscript at various times, but the way it reads now, I think it's informative to musicians who weren't really around in the 80s to understand how he got there. You know, his first record came out in 89, but he got his record deal in 87, and he got it by just playing clubs. That's how he developed his skill, writing songs and playing clubs in Houston and just grinding it out. So there's a lot of stories that he's never really told. You know, when Clint came on the scene, it was like, boom, he had a song called A Better Man, and it was like immediately a hit. So everybody wanted to ask about that song, and kind of had a few paragraphs here and there about his past, but never to this amount of detail. So what I think is really fun about it was just kind of getting his origin story down on the page. Because I think, to me, he's one of the most important voices in country music history, somebody who will be remembered. And, you know, he didn't wait until it was too late to tell the story. We got it down in his own words. So that will be a lot of fun. I hope that he has a good time out there too, because he's a great guy, and he's very engaging as an interviewer, or as an interviewee and an interviewer. He had his own talk show for a while on the Circle Network too. So
is he here in town?
Yep. Yeah. He grew up in Texas, but he moved to Nashville. Gosh, late 90s, I think, early 2000s. I'll have to read the book.
Will there be a book tour? Do you know?
I hope so. Yeah. I think he's very excited about getting it out there. So I'm sure there will be events in Nashville without a doubt. And then, I'm hoping that he can kind of make the rounds. Hope he can go on Kelly Clarkson's show, because I think she's like the funniest talk show host that's out there. Yeah, when this book came out, Kelly had it on. She was talking to Dan Rogers, the Opry general manager now, on video screens, and she held it up for the camera right before commercial break. And I was like, my name is on there this big, but I see it. So yeah, that'd be fun if Clint can do that, because he's great on camera too, and just a good guy to talk to. So that's what's next for me, is just I have to read it one more time next week before it goes to the press.
That's fantastic.
I know, my second book, so that's
May
exciting.
19. I mean, you're back to back.
I know. That basically the week that I think I signed the deal with Clint in July of 2024. Yeah, and we turned it in September of 2025. So it was crunch time at the end, but the way we finished it up was he has tour dates in the Northwest, up south of Seattle, actually, at Auburn. Is there a casino there?
Yeah.
Yep. So he played the show at the casino, and then had like 10 days off before his next show in Portland. So I just went up there for 5 or 6 days, and you know, the dream job. You just sit on the bus and ask anything you want to know. Man, that was cool. So yeah, it's moments like that when I was under deadline, and it was definitely a lot of research and work to get to that point, to know what to ask. But then it's like you're talking to one of your favorite artists, and just like, then what happened? And then what did you think?
Yeah.
You know, and how did it feel? You get to ask questions like that, and they know it's important to the book.
My mind goes to Almost Famous, Opie, the character.
Yeah.
He was so excited to talk, and that's totally you. And
it is me. I remember when that movie came out thinking, this is feeling very familiar to me, because that was my life too. At CMT, it was just popping up at these very famous people's concerts.
Dude, I remember you telling me a story right when I first met you about, I think it was at an early Americana thing, and it was an after hours gig, and it was like Patty Griffin, Gillian Welch, and a couple, not Alison Krauss, but somebody of that, vintage or luminosity. And they were all playing up on stage, and you were like watching, and you were like, oh God, keep your shit together, Chris.
Yeah.
And then you realized like you had your hands on your face, and you're like going nuts, trying to keep yourself from going nuts.
That sounds like me back in the day. I compose myself better now, but yeah, I mean, you think about Patty Griffin, very, very important to me. Gillian Welch, I know, is important to you too. Yeah, and you get to live in Nashville, and you get to be invited to those things, and you think, it's me, I get to do this. But then also the consequence, so to speak, of that is that you also have to write something afterwards and pay attention and kind of detach a little bit so you're able to report on it later. Yeah, I used to go to South by Southwest all the time, and I would schedule moments where I didn't do anything because I had to get back to the hotel to write something, to file a story. And so it does make you a little jealous when you're at an event like that and everyone's out having fun and they're just experiencing it, and that's enough. But for me, it's like, okay, I've experienced it. Now I have to hit pause and go back to the Hampton Inn, type up some things, get some pictures, send it off, figure out how to get back into town. It's a job, but it's a great job.
Yeah, but the thing too is that the opportunity to write is a way of integrating an experience, and processing it and making it more meaningful.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, there's something so wonderful about writing just in terms of just bringing life to a richer level inside yourself. Craig, thank you so much for talking with me.
You're welcome.
This has exceeded my already very high expectations.
Oh gosh. Okay.
So the book is fantastic. I hope that it sells 100,000 copies or 1 million copies. Why box it in?
Why box it in?
And I'll keep my eyes peeled for the new Clint Black.
Yeah. Killin Time.
Killin Time, May 19th.
Yeah.
And I'll see you around town.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks for having me. Peace.
Hey, thanks for watching. Go ahead and click here to like and subscribe. You can click right there to watch another video, or click here to watch a playlist featuring songs of the Morse Code Podcast. Okay, thank you very much.